Okay, we'll take advantage of the new 15-minute format offered by YouTube, which I just found out about. Apparently it's been available since July, but oh well. So thankfully I have a little more time to ramble. A few things I wanted to cover today. Let's see. First of all, somebody made a comment to check out Bashar. So I did a YouTube search and found the channel that channels Bashar the most. I guess other people claim to channel this entity as well, but and the channel's name is Darryl Anka, I believe, and he's a real interesting guy. I looked him up, and he apparently has been doing this since the early '80s or something, and he had some kind of career in entertainment or the media or something, and then it turned into this as his main pursuit. But he's just a really fascinating channel. And while I was watching him, I was just trying to debate: is this a conscious trance channel or whatever, like Matthew Lewin or the ones in the Urantia teaching mission or whatever, and like Daniel Raphael or whatever, and or is this some kind of in between point between DTM? Because it reminded me of reading about Leonora Piper, and there's still some books I want to read about her. She was apparently a really successful medium back in the day, and for her, apparently sometimes she would be more or less conscious. A lot of times she'd be completely unconscious, basically slumped over in her chair or whatever until she started channeling, I think, and then wake up in kind of a stupor and be completely unaware of what had transpired. And that did crop up when I was reading a lot of the psychic research and stuff that's been going on in the 20th century and whatnot. In the latter part of the 19th century, I think some of it was. So that just kind of harkens back to Andrew Jackson Davis and his claim that there's this whole spectrum of levels of trance. And we talked about this before. So I'm not sure if going a little bit deeper to the point where you're not really consciously aware or remembering, I'm not sure if that really helps with the fidelity of the trance. It seems like it would. I mean, if you're not consciously interfering or able to consciously interfere, you'd think you'd get a clearer transmission of sorts. And boy, this stuff with Bashar, this Darryl Anka guy, this seems right on. I mean, far and away the most expressive medium I've ever seen, and probably not unrelated to the fact that the guy that channels it was an actor, and that apparently helps, the ability to express and emote oneself and whatever. And that really comes across well. It's such an expressive channel, and a lot of times people laugh, because he'll be like slumped over and then boom, he'll like go into his thing, and he's all animated and everything for the whole session. But some really good material. I mean, I've benefited a lot just from reading the first few, or listening to the first few YouTube videos I've got online of this guy. So definitely check him out. I'll try to put some links up. Boy, just a lot of stuff about, and I seem to have heard a recent Costrol reading that Roshan Raglan put up about the same kind of thing, and maybe read something from Paul Solomon. It seems like all of them at once are getting the same message. This whole thing about pursuing what you really want, following your enthusiasm, your emotion. So when you have when you're at one of those many points in the day where you're deciding what to do next, and you have a choice, you're supposed to really think about, don't think about repercussions or anything, I guess, to a certain degree or at all, and just think about, how do you feel? What's your enthusiasm level for each one? Which one do you really want to do? And go with that and see where that leads you. And the whole message was from this Bashar reading that will lead you to the things that you need to accomplish. So even if you think, here's this big thing I need to accomplish in my life, and what I want to do immediately won't really get me there, well, the idea is that will lead you, if you keep following at every branch, you keep following the branch where it's what you want to do, that will lead you on the path of where you need to go, even though you didn't think you could get there that way. in the first place, kind of like instantaneously following the higher self or the guidance from above or something. And interesting, that just resonates with a lot of things, you know. But so some terrific material there. I'm pretty convinced that he's definitely as valid a channel as any of the conscious trance channels. Very good stuff from Darryl Anka. And there was a DVD. I'll try to find the link to the first video of that somebody thankfully put online, so you don't have to spend the $40 just to check it out. But somebody put together a DVD that covered like 5 or 6 channels or something, and one of them was this Darryl Anka. And the other ones seem to be more or less, I don't know what you want to say, more or less clear channels. And they seem to have a wide spectrum of philosophies, and when they're talking about heaven and hell and good and evil and reincarnation and whatnot. And so that just reminded me of what Douglas Cottrell was saying. It's like none of them are perfectly clear, but you know, there's this spectrum. Some are much clearer than others. And so my take on that, and with a lot of the plethora of channels out there all over the place, is just like, yeah, well, maybe, you know, take everything with a grain of salt, and maybe this particular one is not quite as right on as some of these others, but, you know, just glean what you can from each one of them and try to put things together and form the big picture. You know, realize that they're all looking at the same mountaintop from different angles or whatnot, or whatever your metaphor is. So hopefully, anyway, on the ones that are just spewing out complete BS, like you know, the aliens such and such from whatever planet wanted the gold on the planet Earth, so those are the enslaved souls in human bodies. And you know, once people go down that kind of a road, I'm just like, yeah, I've read science fiction is better than this, but whatever. You know? But it helps, you know, it helps people to put that together with other stuff. And so if you have something that's completely off the wall and completely different from anything you've heard from anywhere else, well, that's to me anymore, since we have all these channels, that's a pretty good indication that maybe not, you know, maybe that isn't quite quite valid as far as channeling is concerned. So, let's see, 3 things I wanted to cover, and Bashar was one of them. And well, another one was this guy that responded to one of my Urantia videos, and he was saying, oh, well, he spent a lot of time studying it and came to the conclusion that it had to all be fake, you know, all be a farce because Lucifer, you know, he went into the etymology of the word Lucifer, where it came from, where the ideas came from, and there's this whole like mythology we have, the devil and everything, and you know, traced it down to its sources, and he's saying, look, here's the mythology, here's why it's a myth, here's why people just made the stuff up completely, and therefore, since the Urantia book says there is a Lucifer, therefore it must be false. And that brought up a really, really good point. You know, I love it when people get into this, because one thing I initially struggled with the Urantia book is the first thing, when you start reading it, you've got all these corny names. I mean, I'm sorry, okay? Jerusalem, Salvington, Satania, come on, Satania. And then Urantia, what is that? Isn't that like one of those C.S. Lewis science fiction novels or something? It's like, but, you know, so first I'm like, what? People actually expect us to take this seriously, you know? But, you know, the more you get into it, you're just like, okay, well, bear with this for now. If they want to call stuff whatever they want to call it, go right ahead. And you kind of get into it. And thankfully, there are a few spots where the book itself talks about the names it makes up and why it made up the names. And the fact that they are all made up, since these entities don't even use the English language. They don't use language per se, apparently. They communicate telepathically, conceptually, whatever. So there are no like names, like we know names to call things, but things do have denominations, conceptual denominations based upon their function, especially when, as the Urantia book says, it's arbitrarily drawing lines, it's arbitrarily making categories, just like we do in biology or something, when we're arbitrarily making slots to fit all the different plants and animals into, and based on similarities and whatnot. they flat out said that's what they're doing in the Urantia book. They're putting a structure on what's out there, and of the portion of what's out there that they're revealing to us at all, they're putting a structure on that and dividing it into categories, and they're giving those categories names. And when it comes to individual entities that have names, they're making up names of the entities, okay? Now, a lot of times, the specific names of the entities they make up are based upon names from the Bible, from our religions, mythology, whatever, because we apparently were taught, we were revealed certain truths or elements of truth about the cosmology of the universe at times in Earth's past. And so some of those things had, you know, there was some real concept, apparently, that they could tie that name to. From our past, they could tie that name to something that was kind of a connection. It did really kind of symbolize, in a way, sort of, what we thought it did. So they'll call it by the same name, or a similar name, a name that connotes something. You know, Jerusalem connotes Jerusalem. Mansion worlds connotes the many mansions that Christ talked about. Havona connotes heaven. Paradise sounds like paradise. I mean, you know, a lot of these things, they're called those things, the book says, so that the revelation can utilize the concepts and thoughts and facts and ideas that were halfway valid that we already had. So in the book flat out says at the very beginning, it makes a deliberate attempt to take all the cosmology that we already have and take the parts of it that were right on or close enough to right on or had any essence of truth they could use, and then use those concepts, use those words, use those names, and then try to paint us something closer to the real picture as much as possible in a relatively short revelation like that, and the limitations of human language, human consciousness, what they're allowed to reveal, etc., etc., and they're painting the picture they paint. So to me, when the book says that, it is by no means a stretch of the imagination that some entity could be called Lucifer. Because, sure, I mean, I can buy the fact that there may have been some sort of entity out there that had some kind of administrative position that didn't do what he was supposed to do, or had some kind of error or misconception of logic that made him go down some path that was against the grain, against the flow of the way things were going in the administration, and so therefore it was some kind of rebellion, and he had brought other people with him. And, you know, a lot of those elements start to sound like our story of Satan, like taking a third of the angels from heaven, or, you know, whatever the snippets we do have from the book of Revelation or other places in the Bible, or just the Christian mythology or whatever that's grown up, you know, that maybe we had latched on to some account of that event far in the past, or somebody's intuition of those events, and so therefore a little bit of it was halfway right on. And so then it would make perfect sense to call this person Lucifer, and then for the book to say, like it does, that Lucifer was this person, Satan was this person, Beelzebub was this person, and then there's this other person, Caligastia, that was actually, you know, this combination of these other people that you thought were just one person. And, you know, and the book does this all the time. You know, when it's talking about all these different areas of cosmology, is taking the concepts we had before, trying to show things closer, apparently, to the way they really are, and then take, you know, so try to match them up. You know, here's like this thing you thought was one thing, it's actually three different things, or maybe you had three different things that are actually one thing, and it's very, very clear about how it spells things out and delineates them. So, I've read, you know, not nearly the full 2,000 pages of the book, as far as my definitive step-by-step combing through it without trying to not miss anything, and take all my time I can I need to assimilate it. I'm only on page like 300 and something, but from what I've read so far, definitely nothing to make me wig out and say, oh, this can't be true. And in fact, the opposite is true. You know, the more I get into it, the more relaxed I'm about it, the more it really seems very clear that it can be nothing else than the revelation that it claims to be. You know, and that becomes the best working hypothesis, and so far it's been getting a better and better of a working hypothesis. Oh well, so whatever the third thing was I was going to discuss will have to be another video. We've easily reached the 15-minute limit. Didn't seem like it took that long to share and enjoy.